to enter the webinar before we get started. We'll start at about 2 minutes after. Thanks for being here, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 more minute. I hope you guys can't hear the thunder that I can hear right now. It's pretty loud. Hello and welcome to NEWIE's latest virtual Ask Me Anything session. My name is Deanna Sassarosi. I am a sustainability analyst at Eversource, as well as a NEWIE board member and co-chair of NEWIE's DEI committee. I am honored to be moderating today's Ask Me Anything conversation. Today's Ask Me Anything is just one in a continuing series of conversations that NEWIE is hosting with a number of incredible leaders in the energy and environmental fields. The NEWIE board launched this AMA series at the onset of the COVID-19 global pandemic as a way to provide our members and community with a way to connect with leaders in the energy and environmental fields and give you the chance to ask them about their careers, their area of expertise in the industry, and more. They've been so successful that they are now part of our regularly scheduled programming. Check out the NEWIE website, NEWIE.org, to get our email list and keep an eye on our calendar and social channels for future speaker announcements. Before we jump in, we just have a few announcements. Next slide, please. On behalf of everyone at NEWIE, I want to extend a huge thank you to our annual event sponsors, Eversource, Atrium Economics, First Light, Mass CEC, National Grid, Ørsted, Robinson & Cole, Stone Turn, and VHB. These sponsors make our virtual events as well as in-person events possible. Please be sure to check out our upcoming NEWIE events on our events page, including our membership roundtable. On Tuesday, June 27th, we are hosting our annual members roundtable. This is an invite-only event for representatives from our organizational members to interact with our board of directors and advisory board members about strategic priorities and important trends in the industry. Chapter week is coming up. The last week in June is chapter week. We have 3 chapters hosting events, starting with New Hampshire's tour of Lint and Sprungley facility on Wednesday, June 28th. This event is sold out, but there is a waiting list if you'd like to be added. On Thursday, the 29th, Rhode Island is having a meetup in Narragansett Brewery in Providence. That same evening, our Western New England chapter is hosting a field trip to Barstow's Longview Farm, followed by a happy hour at Progression Brewing Company in Northampton. You'll see me at that one. And finally, please be sure to hold the date for the Women Shaping the Agenda. This is the second signature event of the year, our summer event, being held on July 27th at St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire. The traditional networking reception will be followed by a powerful panel of women talking about balancing environmental priorities for renewable energy with a focus on siting, permitting, environmental justice, and public perception. Be on the lookout for more details coming soon. A little bit more of housekeeping. We want today's event to be interactive and conversational. Please submit your question for Tara and Bernie using the Q&A function on Zoom. So not the chat button, the Q&A function circled here. At any time during the presentation or discussion, you'll have the ability to ask questions anonymously. So make sure to do that if you don't want me to read your name. All right, next for some intros. So today with me, I have Tara Pollard. She is a thought leader and strategist in the DE, diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion space, who has been a practitioner for over 20 years. Her professional experience in this field is in both the corporate insurance and nonprofit sectors. Tara has held various DEBI focused positions in the areas of talent acquisition, recruitment strategies, and talent portfolio development and management, ranging from early career to senior level talent. After a 14.5-year stint at Travelers Insurance in multiple leadership roles, Tara shifted to a new industry during a pandemic when she joined Dave Pitney Law Firm as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion. When she joined the firm, she made a commitment to bringing the firm's DEBI core value to life in practical ways through education, raising awareness, and increasing everyday engagement amongst attorneys and staff. We also have with us Bernie Knobbe. I'm never going to forget how to say that since it's just like Obi-Wan Kenobi. The head of global benefits and well-being at AECOM. It's been with the company for over 9 years. He's a member of Global ED&I Steerco, a member of America's Pride ERG Executive Committee member, a member of the LGBTQ plus community, lives with his partner in Los Angeles and rescues senior dogs. So, you know, he's a good guy. So if I didn't mention this in the beginning, both of our panelists are from organizations who have been recognized by the Human Rights Campaign list of best places to work for LGBTQ plus equality. So I want to start off with just congratulations to you both on the work that you've done to be part of organizations that have achieved that level of recognition on this topic. So I'd like to start with, I'm really curious as to what some of those internal conversations were like on this topic. Like, I know this doesn't happen by accident, but particularly towards the beginning, like, was it easy to get buy-in from leadership? What were those like early conversations like? Don't fight.
Yeah, I can kick us off. Thanks so much, Deanna. How's my sound before I jump into it? Okay, good. So yeah, this is a really good question as I thought about the response. I actually checked in with one of our partners who is a co-lead for our Alliance affinity group, which is our affinity group representing the LGBTQ plus community, because I wanted my responses to be not canned, but to be very sincere and organic. So I went to the source. What I was pleased to be reminded of is that our firm's commitment to supporting LGBTQ rights was already in place long before I joined this firm 2.5 years ago. So I think we may be ahead of the curve. This was long before marriage equality or civil unions were publicly accepted. A partner at our firm, who was an adjunct faculty member at UConn School of Law, where she teaches trust in the state, and she'd written and lectured on numerous topics. She was recognized as a thought leader on estate planning for LGBTQ individual couples. Back in 2003, when the appellate court ruled that same-sex couples had the right to marry, she helped to establish Dave Pitney's LGBT planning practice group, specifically focused on rights, estate planning issues for same-sex couples and civil unions because of the unique concerns, I guess, that estate planning had around that time with regard to same-sex couples. So I'm glad to say that there really wasn't any kind of a rub or pushback, and it sounds like we were out of the chute really early on this issue, and that it presented itself as a business imperative, very literally speaking, before it became, one of the well-known issues impacting this community, and a part of any comprehensive inclusion or diversity plan. So that's our firm's background. So the conversation around getting support was one that was an easy one to have, and I'm happy to say preceded my time here at the firm.
That totally makes sense coming from a law firm, that it was the legal side that had a long history there. Bernie, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. My journey was a little different. I've been at AECOM a little over 9 years, but I've worked at places like Gap, Yahoo, Hilton, and they had very strong ERG activity within the organization, and it was already there when I arrived. So all I did was help to support it. But having the responsibility for benefits and well-being, you're in all the conversations because there's specific issues that are associated with this community, and we have to make sure that we're always accounting for those in when we design our programs, how we communicate them, et cetera. So when I first got here, there actually was not ERGs in place. I was not the one that initiated them, but I was incredibly supportive when there was a focus to do so. And I will say our score was not 100 back in 2014, 15, et cetera. And it's been really nice to see the increase. And I believe this is our 5th or 6th year now that we've been at 100. So we made it a priority, and was really pleased when it became just part of what we do and how we think about the talent in the organization. Also, you know, when you think about the clients and the business that we're in, the diversity is naturally there with those individuals and those organizations. So we needed to make sure we have the same within our talent group and within our company. So it's been a great journey, and you know, we're global with 50,000 employees around the world. So we have some unique challenges once you get outside the US, and even these days within the US, depending on which state, et cetera. So it's never dull in this space, but I think our company has a real dedication to this, especially ever since COVID and people working from home and the need for community. It's really brought the ERG to a new level, and there's much more strength within the group, as well as, I think, support, you know, within the organization and even outside the company. So it's been a great journey, and it wasn't something that was specifically planned for. I think it was somewhat evolutionary and somewhat organic, as well as talent joining the company and saying, well, what are we doing around this space? And so fortunately, being a member of the community myself, it was really easy for me to be engaged and also to be supportive. And in the benefits space, like I said, a lot of what we do is related to ensuring the community is supported with our programs. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure. So thank you.
So we just got one question from the chat. What does ERG mean?
Go ahead. Terry, you want me to take that, or you? Go ahead.
Yeah, Employee Resource Group, also known as business networks. So that's what ERG stands for, Employee Resource Groups, also known as affinity groups, all the same things, going by different names.
Bernie, one question that came to mind while you were talking, you said you weren't at 100 when you started. I assume you mean by the HRC's index. So what was it like trying to get to 100? Like, what challenges did you face, and was it like the ERG that was pushing to get there, or was it like another organization within the company?
That's a great question, and actually the ERG did not exist when we were working on getting to that 100 score. So it was really more of an internally organic opportunity between human resources, legal, and just leaders in the business. We said, you know, we really need to ensure when we're looking to attract talent to the organization that we need to have the ability to say we're committed to this community, and also that we have a 100 score, you know, on the Corporate Equality Index. So it really wasn't. The ERG's actually been in place just under 4 years. And we have several ERGs with many other communities as well, but this was one of the first that really drove some of the progress. But yeah, initially it was more about where are we below 100 and why, and then what can we do? There goes the lights. What can we do to go back to 100 or get to 100, excuse me? And we knew in conversations with HRC what we had to do. And so we worked on that probably over a 2-year period to get to that. And we've been able to maintain it ever since. And I'm going to step away just enough to make the lights go back on. So I'm in the office today, but it's pretty quiet around here.
Energy efficiency there.
Yes.
How does your organization go above and beyond for LGBTQ plus workers and their families?
Yeah, when I think about, you know, this question, there are a few ways. One of the things that comes to mind is just the term, bring your whole self to work and be authentically who you are. which is a catchphrase that I'm sure is not new to any or many of us. But coming into this environment and seeing how that looks in practice, it brings me back to an interview that a reporter requested. It might have been as a result of our 100% perfect score, but one of our associates who was being interviewed during that conversation, who was at the time a newer hire, mentioned her comfort not only during the interview process, but also coming into the firm, presenting and identifying with what felt comfortable for her. And that being one of the first interviews that I sat in on after I joined the firm really made a statement about who we are, not just in words or in marketing phrases, but the kind of culture that we've worked to cultivate here. Other things that I think are demonstrations of how we go above and beyond is the fact that we do have an affinity group, a well-established one that's been in place for over 6 years. And the fact that that affinity group is our alliance is what it's called. It's co-led by two leaders here at the firm who are both from that community. And that some of what we do is create a strategic plan of action. So it's a guiding document that outlines the external organizations that we'll align with, the types of policies that impact that particular community that we're going to work closely with our benefits, internal benefits coordinator to make sure are in place. And also that there is full financial support for those endeavors and for those efforts, and the educational program that we bring to the firm, and also statements that we make internally, as well as organizations and events that we support financially and sponsor externally. Those, to me, and to this community, are expressions of how much the firm takes seriously this commitment. And there's a phrase that I love, I think that fits, which is budget is a moral document because it reflects what we care about. So the fact that there are not only people resources to support our efforts, the openness to make statements about legislation that we align with and ones that we oppose, as well as the financial support that we need to be as involved and show support both internally and externally in the ways that I mentioned. That's a very strong statement that our firm makes and backs it up with action and dollars.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, putting your money where your mouth is. I'm curious about, and you might not know the answer to this, Tara, but you said that someone who was interviewing just expressed how comfortable they felt to be themselves during the interview. Do you know what it was about the interview that made them feel that way?
Absolutely. So this particular candidate at the time who became an associate walked into the interview wearing a suit. And if we think about the gender that we normally would associate with wearing a pantsuit, it was what she felt comfortable in. And then moving from the interview to coming into work in the office for the first time, dressed that way without any double takes, without having to explain anything, without having, to make any kind of a different entry into any room, just felt normal to her, which normalized it for our entire community, specifically, the office location that she was physically in. So
yeah,
that's what that.
That really resonates with me. I love rocking a suit. It's my favorite piece of formal wear. So that's great. Bernie, how about you? How does your organization go above and beyond for LGBTQ plus workers and their families?
Yeah, and I think for us, in a similar way, it has been a journey. So, for example, we now have ED&I positions in the Americas, in the Europe and India market, and then I'm also in Asia and in ANZ. And so because we're global, we actually have dedicated resources now in different parts of the world to help really make this more of a focus. So that's really a positive. And I think the ERGs have evolved because of that initial support that said, we actually need this to be an official position. We need people to be focused on it. And that's really helped us to pull levers, as we say, and move forward in a lot of different areas related to this. Also, I think because, the war for talent is still out there, and especially in our space, moving to more professional services, we really are looking for key talent in that architecture, engineering, construction, design space. And that tends to bring, a certain level of education and a certain level of diversity, which is a really positive thing and something the organization is continuing to try to do, but it can be challenging. And so we need to take all those barriers out of the way and help people to say, this is a place where I want to be, and a place that I want to work. We're also fortunate, I think, as a company, that we have a lot of both current projects and future opportunities in the ESG space, in the environment, in climate, in transportation, et cetera. And a lot of that, I think, really does resonate with some of the newer entrants to the workforce, as some of those throughout their various workforce generations. And we know we have 4 now in the workforce. So it's a little challenging, but what's nice is that as we progress, our programs are set up to be able to support that. And our leadership has also been very supportive as well. So it has been more of a journey for us, but I just happened to look on something on the career site last month, and it was talking about vibrant careers and things that you can do. And the person that was typing, and you could see in the video, and they had a rainbow bracelet on. And I thought, boy, have we come a long way, because I can tell you, when I joined the organization, that probably wouldn't have happened. Not that there was anything in the company that was necessarily against it. We just hadn't gotten there yet. And now it's so nice to see. Of course, there was also a dog on the lap of the person, which I like as they're typing, because we have a what we call freedom to grow, which enables you to work on a hybrid basis under certain circumstances. And so all those things are what makes the place where you work what is the place that you work, right? And so it's not just programs, it's the environment, it's the culture, and it's the support that Tara was talking about earlier. And so I think we've really done a lot to show that. We used to be headquartered here in LA. 2 years ago, we moved to Dallas. So we've been in a Dallas Pride Parade for the last 2 years, and actually had a float both years. We're here in LA, it was a group walking. And so they may not seem like big things, but if you're looking at it from a filter internally, those are big steps forward for us. And we're pretty excited about that, including, of course, our pride flag, because it was 103 degrees last year. So everybody had these, but then we also had a QPR code to remind people they could go and get information on, if you're thinking about joining a company and you have an engineering background, maybe AECom's right for you. So it's small things, but they all add up. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. There are so many directions I want to take this conversation, but I want to remind the group, anyone in attendance, to please put your questions in the chat. Oh, we just got one, so I'll have to hold off on my thoughts. So I've got a question from Sarah. While all the New England states prohibit employment discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, sexual orientation is not a protected category under the Civil Rights Act. What are some proactive steps that employers can take to protect LGBTQ individuals from discrimination at work, especially if they are based in an area where these protections aren't a given?
That's a really good question. So some of, and I'm going to do my best to answer it, but feel free to let me know if there are portions I still need to address after I share. So there are statements that we make internally, depending on legislation that we're aware of, in different states. And so providing a safe space in that, making sure that all of our employees know that that while there are things that happen outside of our firm, we're well aware that they impact us and how we engage and how we move through our days every day. So, one safeguard, if you will, that we put in place is to create the kind of psychological safety in this space so that our employees know that the expectation is not for you to hang up those things that personally impact you when you walk literally across the threshold into the office. We don't expect you to, buckle down and do and perform and deliver what's expected of you instead for this to be a place where if there's something bothering you that isn't work related, that we understand that bringing your whole self to work includes bringing some of those issues that are distracting you, your thoughts, and that will impact, again, the way that you engage and the way that you move through your day. So being able or knowing that we have an ERG, our Alliance affinity group, and we have a racial justice and equity task force as two safe places where employees can come in, specifically from this community, share what's troubling them, and either suggest that we have a firm-wide conversation about it to heighten awareness and to educate and to allow for other employees who may be outside of that particular community to ask questions and to get informed. But also, should they feel so strongly that they'd like for us, either as a firm or as the affinity group, to make a statement, again, to make sure that the awareness is shared across our firm in all locations, but also to express that this is, again, something that impacts us. So creating that safe space and psychological safety is one way, that we help to make our employees feel supported and cared about beyond the transactional work that we do every day, but just supported at the very basic human level. So that's one way that we practically provide support and show our employees that we care about the things that impact them as human beings that, again, might not be work or matter related.
Great.
Well, I'll always do that disclaimer. I'm not an attorney, right? I'm not in employment law. I'm a Center of Excellence HR person doing benefits and well-being for a long time, which I'm proud of. But I'll certainly know what I somewhat know and what I do not know. But what I think, the way we look at this is similar, but how we approach it is a little different. And that is that we realize that those things outside the organization can be incredibly difficult, stressful. It brings tremendous mental health issues, as well as physical ones, depending on where you're located, what state you're in, et cetera. I mean, we're in a place in the world in the last year or two that I just had not anticipated that we would be, but this is where we are. And so there are some things that we can't necessarily manage. So what we have to do is focus on our employees and their families and say, what can our programs do to help support them as they work through these issues? So our well-being program has 6 different pillars, and one of those is emotional well-being. And so we have a lot of tools and resources available, and not just the EAP, for example, Employee Assistance Program. Sorry, we abbreviate everything in benefits. But we also have a lot of guides and resources available to help employees and even managers that are helping employees to understand, what do you do when someone has this issue or that issue? We had a campaign called Let's Talk, and it was about just making sure when you talk to your employees, just check in. How are you doing? Let's talk. Is there anything I can be doing to support you, not just your career, but also just in life in general? Because really, especially after COVID 3 years ago started with the pandemic, it's just to change the dynamic of the workforce, and we have to adjust to that. But at the same time, the world is changing around the laws that apply in the various states and so forth. So we've tried to, wherever possible, offer one comprehensive program across all the states, but we know that it has to be legally allowed in certain states and so forth. And so we're trying to keep up with all those requirements, and it's very challenging to do so, and a bit disheartening at times as well because of what's currently happening. But I think, in the end of the day, it's about providing support and resources to our employees, and that they know that there's a place they can go to get support, and also that we have programs in place to also help them with their physical and emotional well-being, as far as what kind of benefits might be available to them, whether it's mental health related or even physical, because the toll that stress takes is not just emotional, but it also has a physical aspect to yourself and to your family. And so all those things are part of what we think about when we put our programs together, but it's not something that we necessarily look at the legal aspects of the employment side. We think more about, with all that happening, how can we try to fill in as many of the gaps in addition to that to help support our employees. And we have a women's leadership group, and we have an African American, and we have a veteran, all these various ERGs and communities that we've established to try to make people feel they can come together and support each other, similar to other outside groups that maybe you participate in personally. So we are doing a lot of that and continue to support it. So we'll see how this all goes. It's a very interesting time for all of us.
One thing.
Bernie,
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
I'm sorry. I really appreciate that thorough answer. And we have similar, benefits and support mechanisms internally. One piece, though, that you mentioned that I think is really key to this and so many other conversations as it relates to underserved or diverse communities, which is the frequent check-ins, right? The connecting on a human level, not around work. That we try to really integrate into how we engage every day. So the way that we refer to it at our firm is everyday engagement, right? So it's checking in to see how our colleagues are doing, being naturally curious about what's going on in their lives, and to do that not as a preface to here's a project for you to do, or here's something that I need from you that we have to talk about a deadline around. But again, everyday engagement, checking in. So when we talk about things like courageous conversations or having the courage to have conversations with each other about certain subject matter, when you take the time and make the investment to connect with your colleagues, just because, again, at that very basic human level, then when there's subject matter that has to be discussed that may be outside of the norm, you don't have to necessarily be courageous or bold to have it. It's just having a conversation with someone who you've already taken the time to build a trust relationship with, and that provides a certain level of comfort, of security, learning how to tell your story and openly share, encouraging others to do so. And to do this at the onset, not waiting until there's an issue that arises, or not waiting until someone walks in with a concerning look or a certain energy that just doesn't feel like normal for them. But when you have an established relationship, it's just a normal check-in, right? And to build trust, that's done by just checking in on a frequent basis. So I think that was a really, really important point that you made, Bernie, and worth emphasizing.
Well, thank you. And I'll make one other comment I thought of after your comments, and that is we do have one of our strategies and philosophies around our well-being program is a culture of caring. And so, to be kind and to be supportive is critical to having, employees in your organization that feel like they truly are supported, not just saying it, but actually showing it. And we, if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot there, but in the last few months, we've created what we call our Mental Health Allies program. And so if you're an individual that you think you need additional support, there are actually people that have gone through a training that can be helpful to you to just let you know that there is someone here that cares. And if you need to be guided, there are places you can go for support. They're not practitioners, but sometimes people just don't know how to get started, or they don't feel comfortable perhaps speaking with their manager, but they would feel comfortable speaking with someone that's representing our strategy of having a culture of caring, but that are not necessarily connected to that individual. And so that's just started in the last couple of months. So we'll have more to talk about it in the future around that. But so far the engagement has been good. And we've had a lot of people want to be a mental health ally. It's a voluntary thing. But most people that speak up for that, they're caring, they're good listeners. They tend to be intuitive around individuals' needs, and they're living the example every day. And those are the kind of people we want doing that. So, yeah, good point.
That's really cool. I haven't heard of that type of program. One question I wanted to ask that popped into my head as both of you were answering that question is that it seems like in recent years, the expectations on employers to take a stance on these social issues has increased, and to provide more support around these social issues has increased. And I read a statistic that it's estimated that by 2040, nearly 1 in 5 of adults will identify as LGBT. So I'm just wondering if you guys have seen like any friction across generations in corporations providing more of this like societal cultural support. And like I was thinking about your point, Tara, about how, what goes on in the world doesn't just stop when you go to work. It still happens and still affects you. But I think that the culture 20 years ago was that you were supposed to kind of turn all that off and just like go to work and be a robot. So yeah, any thoughts on that topic and kind of the expectations of the younger generation?
I appreciate that question, especially the way that you phrased it. From experience, and I've been in the inclusion field for over 20 years, it seems like we shifted really quickly. And I'll say that, the George Floyd tragedy really accelerated a lot of inclusion programs and definitely heightened the sense of urgency around action, not just words. But we shifted from what you just mentioned, which I'll call the old employment contract, using that term loosely because I'm not an attorney. But right, it was understood that you hang your personal things on the door, on your way in, and you pick them up on the way out, and they're not to be discussed. To the point where certain conversation was considered taboo or inappropriate in the business environment or within the office. And that there was a shift to bring your whole authentic self to work. What we didn't account for, and I'm saying, we in the most broad general term leadership, firm or company leadership, is what we need to do from a skill set and competency perspective as leaders that would give us the skill that we need to now manage people bringing their whole selves to work. We didn't think about that. I think we got so caught up in that marketing phrase and not really understanding or appreciating what that would mean until after it started happening. And so it's important to recognize that it came from the very best of intentions, but we just didn't really appreciate what that meant and what that would require for us as leaders. Shifting now to realizing one of the things that means is that, it's connecting or engaging on a different level and in a different way. So that whole concept of everyday engagement, the concept of, the power of being vulnerable, as opposed to that being seen as something that, is not powerful or somehow is seen as something that makes you less professional or quote unquote weak, as opposed to being like a strong, individual professional at work. So, things have shifted, and it's not like the training came before the shift in thinking. So everyday engagement is important. Bringing things again, especially post-pandemic, back to connecting at a human level. So really bringing that human aspect more fully. I can't even say back into the conversation, but it's really introducing it into the conversation and making it not only okay, but almost a requirement for how you build relationships and connect with those who you work with and who you work for, both internally and externally. And that's not been, an easy shift to make, because I can't remember other points in time where it was okay to focus on, employees and teammates as humans at that level, and not as, connection points that we use to get work done and to get it through the door and deliver on what clients expect. So a lot of, thinking out loud to respond to that answer, but that's how I've seen the tide turn. And that's the gap that I noticed. We didn't do that training for leaders to understand or to get ready and prepared for what this would mean in terms of expanding leadership skills and competencies in a very different way.
Great points. I'm trying to think how to add to that. So I think for us, some things that we have done is town halls, where we bring in leaders and they talk about, what their actions are and or how they support, the various culture of caring initiatives around the organization for the various communities that people may identify with. And we encourage that. And sometimes it's also about being allies. You may not be a member of a community, but you have a lot of either friends or coworkers, and you want to be supportive. So we've tried to really ensure that everything we do. So for example, if you go to our benefits site, which is public, aecombenefits.com, don't need username or password to see it. For people that are thinking about coming to join the organization, you can see everything you need to understand how we do this. And then we also have well-being at aecom.com. It's also available to anyone. And it really does, I think, reflect some of the things that we've done. And there's leadership sections and so forth. So we've tried to say, this is just, I always call it the DNA of the company, right? It's not an HR program and it's not a business initiative. It's just how we conduct business every day, and it can always improve. So that bringing yourself to work, I mean, I happen to be an individual that remembers the days when that was not an option and you left everything at the door. And it took a long time for some of us to get to a point where we felt very comfortable about that, like we do now. But I think it also just depends on the organization you're in, the time period. There's a great Will and Grace line from the second time around on the show when Will made the comment. He's like, I can't believe how the quote 20 somethings, 30 something, how they act about all this. We blazed the trail. And it's like, that's kind of a fair statement. But everybody's been blazing the trail, even pre ourselves. And so this has all been a journey. And I think the more that we can help people in the organization to realize this shouldn't be a concern, it should actually be an opportunity. And if everybody can just be as good as they are without worrying about what they're supposed to be or how they're supposed to represent themselves, they'll be more productive, more creative, more, I guess, add value to the business, because it's what they're there to do. And we don't want to put any barriers or walls in front of that might get in their way. But we have to be realistic too. I mean, we work in various states around the United States and in various countries around the world, and things are just different. So we have to be respectful of that. But I think we can also make people feel very comfortable that they can be themselves when they're here and when they're working with the clients and so forth. So it's definitely a journey, and we have not crossed the finish line. It's a marathon, and I don't even know if we're halfway. We still have a long way to go, but the good news is we're not at the starting line either. We are way past that. We're already sore from the run, and we got a way to go to get that 26-mile marker. But every time you get another mile in, there's progress there. So I'm optimistic about it, but we're not there yet.
I'd like to add, Bernie, because what you said brought up a lot of other thoughts for me, is the importance of, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it is worth repeating again, everyday engagement and connecting and being naturally curious, and making that safe environment, making sure that it's okay to ask questions. And it's okay sometimes to even say the wrong thing, because the assumption of positivity is important, right? And by making it okay to admit that this is new for me and I don't have all the answers, or this is new for me and I'd like to ask questions, but I'm not sure how to without potentially offending someone, or, without sounding like I'm not fully aware or an expert on the subject. And when you think about professional profile and reputation, these are all things that, we're guarded over. But I can't tell you how many times as the quote unquote director of diversity at our firm, I have put myself out there to ask a curious question, to phrase things like, that's so interesting. I've never been exposed to that. Can you tell me more? And to make sure that those of us involved in this journey, right, and it's a part of each of our responsibility to some degree within what we have control over, or the level of our span of our reach, right? That there's certain things that we each need to do to create belonging and to make it safe for others, but that being naturally curious is okay, and not being not being up on what, like, the latest acceptable term, that's okay. And that someone who's considered, especially those who are considered quote unquote leaders or practitioners in this field, that what we really are students at heart, and continual learners, right? And we try to set the example that you don't really arrive ever at knowing all, or being at a point where there's no new information, because this is a continuous learning process, which is why it is a journey, that a destination is not really a finite endpoint, because as long as there are differences, and, as much as we are human, we are different, then it just is an indication that this is something that you continually learn. And the more people that you talk to and the more comfortable you make it to have kinds of conversations where you can learn from and learning experiences, that is just what gets you better practice at asking questions, and through demonstrating by example, making others feel comfortable to be curious and feel comfortable to ask questions, but that you don't do any of that without first taking the time to build trust, because that creates that safety, that psychological safety to ask what would have been maybe an inappropriate question, or one that, there's some fear behind because you don't know the answer, just to say, it's okay. And that's a part of this learning process. And that's the way that you advance the conversations and kind of, advance on that inclusion journey. And that concept is really easy to talk about, but when you put that within the confines of a professional environment, where you're kind of expected to be an expert at something or to come in with some level of knowledge, it's counterintuitive to that, but we have to make that more normal and more, acceptable.
I really appreciate the point about everyday engagement. One way that I kind of think about that is, like you said, Tara, we don't want to be, just robots who use each other to get work done. And how I think about that every day is, we say every day, how are you? Good. You? Good. And it just feels so like fake to me. So I always try to give people like more than that. Like, oh, I hit an awesome PR at the gym. My puppy did something really cute. I'm excited to try a new restaurant tonight. Just something that it's just not like, I don't know, we're not just robots here to get work done. Take the mask off, as I say. We've got some questions coming in from the chat that I'd like to get to. Bernie made an interesting point about employees bringing authentic selves to work and engaging with clients. Sometimes consultants tend to depersonalize interactions with clients. How does AECOM balance that dynamic?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the project that you're working on, and it depends on the client, right? But I do know a couple of things that we've done recently. So for example, many either governmental agencies or just certain clients are saying, we want to know what you're doing to support the ERGs in your organization, ED&I, ESG, and well-being. There was a time when everything was around health and safety, and it still is, but now it's both health and safety and well-being. And in fact, we have well-being moments at the beginning of meetings, or you can have safety moments. You pick and choose. And so it's all about like continuing that journey. And but I think what we did is we actually created a guide that they can put in the RFPs or in the business proposals that actually summarizes it in a pretty succinct way, but just shows all the support within the organization so that they know that our employees are supported, so that when they come to be on the team that supports the client, they have a good understanding of what's behind that, so that they feel like they're working with employees that feel good about the organization, and that is going to therefore feel good about the work that they're doing for the client. So I don't know if I have an example of one by one, clients, but I know we often get questions around, what do we do about ED&I? What do we do about particular communities? And we're fortunate because we've made a lot of investments in the last 2 to 3 years to create all the content and also to have examples of, ways that the organization puts that information out there so others can access it as well. Like I said, on these websites that we've created. So if you really don't know for sure how we do it, or you're wondering if it's really true and you want to understand what we do to support it, you can go out and take a look. And that's really helped us to make it more transparent. And I think it's always better when it's transparent versus when it's behind the curtain. And that also leads to the dialogue, like Tara was saying. To me, it's all about staying in school, and that's both work and life. Every day you should be learning about others, about new ways of life, and also about new things in the world. And so if you have that natural thinking pattern to yourself, it's going to happen. It's the people that don't think that way. That's the bigger challenge. So you have to draw them in. So I don't know if that totally answered the question, but I feel like we do a lot to make sure if a client asks, we have a lot to show that we really take this seriously.
I haven't heard about
And
that being included in RFPs. That's cool. Tara, do you have another comment?
Yeah, if I could add to that. So I agree with everything that Bernie said. One of the things that we strongly try to encourage is, so yes, we have the 100% CEI score. We're Mansfield certified. We align with Rooney rules. So those accolades and recognitions that are really important to us are things that naturally catch the attention of those within and outside of industries, right? It says something about who we are, what's important to us. We get various industry as well as client surveys asking about our DE&I initiatives and, our the composition of our diverse teams that we that are working on their matters, and they've gotten really detailed over time to where it's not just them depending on what we're saying by word, but they want us to back that up now with show the proof and practically what does this look like and what are the markers and the progress indicators and all that great stuff, which I think is good. It's necessary. It has its place, but it's only one level and it's only one snapshot and it doesn't tell the full picture. So what I strongly encourage and the kind of direction and strategy that I'm looking to move our firm into as it relates with client engagement is, yes, we respond to surveys because we understand they're important to our clients and to industry designations. It does make a statement, at least at the base level, about who we are as a firm. But practically speaking, what I see our leadership's responsibility in doing is to make sure that the lived experiences of our attorneys and staff align with who we say we are from those designations or what that marketing material claims that we are. And so that's when it comes down to practically what does this look like and feel like? How does it feel to be within this culture, within this firm? And so that to me is really where the rubber meets the road. And that's where I think we get into a lot of the conversations around let's talk about the surveys beyond the numbers. And I'd love to sit across the table or on a Zoom with a client and really get an understanding from their perspective. What's important to you from an inclusion perspective? Because we can continue to give you the updates on, these designations that we have and how we show up from a marketing perspective. But tell us what's important to you so that we can proactively share with you what we're doing along those particular lines, since that's what you're interested in, or just the conversation because it allows for this kind of exchange. And it's, to me, more valuable than just bullets, numbers, and statistics and trying to understand the story that it tells. This type of engagement, roundtable discussion, question and answer to me is like data with DNA, with a soul, right? You understand the story behind the story because that comes through the conversation and the exchange.
One other thing I'll add to that is don't forget to ask those same questions of the providers and the organizations you work with. So in our space, all of the companies, the service providers, the vendors, the carriers, all those different groups we partner with, we ask them the exact same questions. What are you doing around ED&I? What are you doing around diversity? And making sure that they can actually demonstrate what they're doing, because in many ways they're an adjunct or an extension of our organization and or the HR function. So we have to ensure that they reflect us in the way that we can do that ourselves internally, but a lot of what we do now is through others. And so it's really important not to forget that aspect of it, because they really are, in many ways, the individuals your employees might be talking with. And so you want to make sure they represent your culture and your strategy as well. So just a thought there. But I know you got other questions, so thanks.
We've only got a few minutes left, and we've got one more question in the chat I'd like to get to. We are a small 11-person startup company. How would you recommend we get started in building the type of culture you are talking about in a way that doesn't add more stress to the pile of work we already have? Big question.
So, to break the, Bernie, you want to lead out on this one?
No, please go ahead.
To break it down and make it really simple is ask. I'm thinking about some of the other things that we talked about in topics as we kind of got prepared for what to expect today. One of the questions is, how one of the thoughts we talked through is how someone can become a stronger ally or show allyship. Just ask. Ask people what's important to them. Ask them what they care about, and they'll tell you. And that's a good place to begin building a strategy, especially when you have a smaller team. You can call it an employee engagement survey, but just simply a communication that lets your team know that you're interested about who they are and what's important to them, again, beyond the transactional work that we do or the gifts and the talents that they bring to the work product. But if you ask people what they care about, they'll tell you. And that's exactly what I did entering this firm, is I spent time talking with every, a member of our affinity groups or, underserved populations. And I asked them, what brought you here, what keeps you here, and what's important to you when it comes to inclusion. And from their responses, I basically built what the strategy would be, addressing those things that were expressed areas of interest, concern, or topics that people cared about. So that's one place to start, very basic building block to get a sense of, where to start, what the priorities are, how to organize any programs or educational exercises that you're looking to build into this, and to keep it as engaging as possible. And if you're going to ask a question, make sure you follow up with some type of a response. And not that you have to have the canned answer, but to show your efforts towards addressing, bringing heightened awareness to. The effort is so important because the return on investment or results may be longer term, but it's integral steps to get there. But start by asking the questions and not assuming that this is a good place to start because this is a hot topic or something that is being talked about across the inclusion space. Just ask.
That's great. And I'll just add a couple of thoughts. A group of 11. So things that we do is ask everybody to wear a hat that represents them. What are they interested in? What sports team do they reflect? So like here's my LA, I love the LA football club because it's soccer group, but they've got one just for pride, right? So it's like, okay, but also a t-shirt that you might wear. So something like that can be very simple, but it opens up dialogue and someone says, oh, did you go to school there? Oh, I know. It all becomes conversation. And so what you want to just do is find small ways to get people talking. I mean, remember when there was a suggestion box? Remember when there was a comment box where you could actually put that anonymously in there? I've seen companies do Post-it notes where you just leave a note and anybody can see them and you put them up and others do it as well. And then you can go back a week later and say, what are people thinking about? What are they concerned about? What would they like us to be doing? These are not formal, expensive, or I guess I call them, they're simple ways to just get people engaged. And sometimes simple is better than overcomplicated or overthought. Because at the end of the day, I always say human resources, human is our first name. And everybody talks about ROI, return on investment. It's really return on individual. It's both. If you don't have the financing, you can't be successful as a business. But if you don't have the individuals, you don't have the talent to be successful. So little things like that can, I think, drive the energy that you want, whether you're 11 people, 1,100, or 11,000. It all sort of applies. You just have to scale it accordingly. So I hope that helps.
Well, I know I certainly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you both for joining us today and providing your insight and wisdom to the NEWIEE community. I'd like to also thank our sponsors who make our events possible. We'll call that a wrap. Thank you both so much.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Pride and be well.
Take care. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.